So, hello again everyone, and a very warm welcome to the second session of the IBSA Blind Football online coaching course. Very nice to see so many people from so many different countries and continents taking part in this course. And I will just be talking for a couple of seconds, and then I will pass the floor on to the real experts in blind football coaching. So this is the second session in 3. We will be here for 2 hours. We'll have a short break halfway through. And the IBSA team this evening is Jonathan Pugh, who's a member of the football committee and head coach of the England blind football team. Uli Pfisterer, chair of the football committee and a former international coach. Jeff Davis, member of the committee. Myself, I am a project manager for IBSA Blind Football. And joining us today, we also have Adam Bendel, who's Project B1 manager and part of the England blind football team coaching setup. Welcome again to everyone, and I will now pass on the floor to Jonathan. All yours.
Hello, everyone. If just to reiterate David's points around turning off anyone's microphones and videos, that would really help with the quality of the videos that I'm going to share. I do appreciate that they're not going to be in perfect condition, so if people can just look in the chat box, there is a link to the video I'm going to share, so you can look at that at your own discretion. And we're going to try and make this second online course more interactive. So there will be quite a lot of questions asked of you. So you can put in the chat box, and Jeff Davis will be firing those questions out to myself, Adam, and Uli to hopefully try and answer some of the things you need to do. But firstly, we're going to recap on what we worked on in workshop 1. I'll just quickly talk through what we're going to be hoping to do in workshop 2. We're going to do a recap on workshop 1. We're going to talk about the 4-corner model and long-term development plan, which is something that we in the FA use to help develop our young players. But I'll talk about that a bit more in a second. Talk about what makes a good blind football coach. And then talking about how we develop the skills that we talked about in the first course, and how we integrate them into making them into a skill. And we do that in this country for using small-sided game. And myself and Adam really believe that it's a really good tool to help develop players and coaches through their journey. And that's using a 1v2, 2v2 type of practice, which can help you build up the game up into the full game. I'd really like to thank the Football Association for allowing Adam to come on to this workshop, because some of this workshop is presented by the FA in this country, and we're so keen for it to be shared around the world to help develop the rest of the coaching fraternity. So thanks for Adam for coming along today. So session 1 recap. Firstly, we talked about getting to know your players and what to expect when first meeting them. And we showed you how we'd integrate a player into the pitch for the first time, and showed you some tricks around how we could get them comfortable with the playing environment and the goals and the pitch geography, the things they'd need to know when learning how to play football for the first time. And then we moved on to movement patterns, the type of movements that happen in a game, how we can develop players' core stability and their balance, because these are all really important areas of the game that players need to work on. And I'm not going to apologise, but Adam will repeat a lot of the things we did in session 1, because these are the fundamental things that players need to do before they when they reach the pathway and go through the pathway. So the expectations of a new player, and I showed you lots of videos of a very new player learning how to play the game with the experience of an experienced player, who I would be pleased to be announcing that he will be coming on to session 3, so we can interview him and he can talk about his life experience as a blind footballer, but also as a blind person in general, and what football's done for him. again, using orientation skills around the pitch to help players develop their game. Then we introduced the ball and showed you some ways of teaching a player to control the ball and the different reasons why we use different parts of our foot to control it, and how we can progress that to a higher level, and making the coach, the technical detail of the coach and what they can offer to a player. Also, we talked about the safety aspects and medical conditions which may influence the player. And then we talked about the coaching basics and how we progress that forward. And also the different styles of coaching, because everyone's different. And I think it's really important that every player gets an opportunity to learn and learn through the way they learn the game. Okay, so are you okay with anyone? Oli, if you need to jump in, you're more than welcome to jump in at any time. You're on mute. Oli, mute.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, just to add, there were some questions coming last time, because we had a lot of situations on a one-to-one. And just a remark that, of course, if you come in, say, into a school and you have a group of people to do a lot of pair work, to have one person blindfolded, or to if you have a whole group to pass the ball on in a circle, or maybe add a second ball to make yourself noticeable and to just get a communication going, because sometimes you have a situation where you have a whole new group and you may not have the time to just work on a one-to-one straight away, right? That's just, we can maybe, when it comes to other questions, we can elaborate on that. When you have a whole new group of people you don't know, right?
Yeah.
Okay, keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, just to reiterate, I think Uli was trying to say then that obviously there are loads of different ways of exposing people to blind football, and doesn't have to necessarily be one-to-one, and we can move it forward. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is what makes a player, and I talked about the long-term development plan and the four-corner model. So we believe we teach our players through using these four areas. So, sorry, just someone coming in. So the physical area, obviously the strength and the kind of strength conditioning area of the game. Technical, so learning the skills that are required to be a good footballer. Psychological, the things that impact from using your mental experience. And social, the things that influence the game and, the reasons why and the feelings around that game. So what I'm going to ask you to do straight away, I'm going to play you 3 to 4 minutes of a video, and this video is taken from the World Cup in 2017 from Madrid between Argentina and Brazil. And what I want you to do is observe the game and start making some notes, and try and think of one key area from each of these four areas that you feel that a blind person, the characteristics that blind person shows. I will warn you, the video might not play as smoothly as you'd like it, because there are quite a few people on the call, but hopefully you'll be able to get the experience of what you need to be able to start putting down some information in the chat.
John, just before you start the video, just to say, can people please post anything in the chat box, anything they see under these four areas, part of the list from what people put in the chat box. So if you see something around, say you saw something technically that you thought was very good, put it in the chat box, I'll record it, and then John will talk about it after we watch the video. Thank you.
Thank you.
Casio hacia zona izquierda, zona derecha, según el ataque del conjunto argentino. Lo va a intentar Ángel Deldo. Ojito a este futbolista. Ahí está Ángel Deldo. Intentaba combinar con Maxi. Buen cierre ahora de Casio López. Ahí está Casio presionándole Ángel Deldo. Apoyado en banda, zona izquierda. Según la defensa del conjunto brasileño. Prácticamente ahí a 7 metros y medio. Muy escorado. El balón prácticamente en el córner ahora mismo, despejando la defensa brasileña. El balón que va a intentar llegar a el Jefinho, no lo consigue, muy largo el envío, saque de puerta para Germán Mulek.
Quintetos de lujo en ambos equipos, salen con todo.
Así es, ahora sí que nos sale David Peralta. Ha salido Maxi de inicio en la segunda parte con Germán Mulek, Coqui, Acardi y Deldo. Y en Brasil, pues Luan, Casio, Gletson, Ricardinho y Jefinho. Ahí está Ricardinho. No ha habido absolutamente nada. Protesta aquí un miembro del staff de Brasil que tenemos cerquita de la cabina de retransmisiones.
Han hecho embudo ahí.
En torneo.
Lo típico de ellos, el embudo.
Por cierto, muchísimo seguimiento a través de las redes, en los comentarios en el streaming. Saludamos a toda la afición de Argentina. Saludamos a toda la afición de Brasil. Allí son ahora mismo las 7:49 de la mañana de este domingo, 17 de junio de 2018. Madrugando para ver a sus selecciones. Hoy se trabaja el domingo. Es un día importante también, lógicamente, para ambos países, para ambas selecciones, para ambas naciones en este campeonato del mundo de fútbol para ciegos. Hay falta a favor de Brasil. Alexia, la primera del partido en la segunda parte.
Primera del partido, sí. Vamos a ver cómo termina esta acción. Está bastante alejada todavía.
8 metros, muy hacia valla, ¿no? 8 o 9 metros quizás, ¿no?
Sí.
Sí, 8 o 9 metros, sí, muy escorada valla izquierda.
Y ha marcado la primera falta colectiva. El colegiado del encuentro, el francés François Courset, que ha sido árbitro principal prácticamente en todos los encuentros importantes de este mundial. Ahí está la primera falta.
Falta el número 2.
En las
Argentina
gradas,
defiende.
chicos, todos los países aquí, contemplando este espectáculo.
Sí, porque luego tendremos la ceremonia de clausura con la entrega de trofeos y medallas, ¿eh?
Ricardinho va a salir, defensa 3-1, 3-1 abierto, me parece, ¿no? Fede detrás, sí.
Sí, ahí está Eduardo Nart. Lleva Sireño.
Segundo palo Jefinho, ¿puede ser? Sí, lo veo desde aquí.
Sí.
Sí, muy abierto, sí.
Muy abierto además. Ahí está Ricardinho, disparo. Ricardinho, punterazo del lado izquierdo en la portería de Germán Mulek. Ese por derecho según su visión. Vaya lanzamiento de Ricardinho. Apareció la magia, como acaba de decir Jesús Vargueiras. Balón al palo. Y dentro de la portería argentina, Alexia Rivas se adelanta a Brasil en la final.
Vaya locura, estamos viendo aquí al lado del banquillo de Brasil y la afición argentina que en un momento, bueno, se quedó callada, pero ahora se viene arriba animando a su equipo.
Apareció la calidad, vaya golazo.
Qué ángulo,
la repetición, ¿eh?
Qué ángulo abre, ¿eh? Los segundos palos son imposibles con el portero, ¿eh? Punterazo enorme, ¿eh?
10 goles para Ricardinho, ahora mismo máximo goleador y seguramente el mejor jugador de todo el torneo. Jesús.
Para mí sí, ha sido el mejor en este torneo. Si no, a nivel mundial, yo creo que no hay ningún jugador que se parezca a Ricardinho.
Pues el 0-1 para Brasil, nada más arrancar la segunda parte en el minuto 2 y 22 segundos del segundo acto. Argentina, lógicamente, tiene que ir a por el tanto del empate después del gol de Ricardo Steiner Salves. 0-1 para Brasil. Ojo, Maxi, no puede enmendar. Maxi Espinillo, Ángel Deldo, Fede Acardi, Coqui Padilla. Pero Ricardinho está hecho de otra pasta. El latigazo que se ha sacado, el punterazo que ha aparecido de su chistera para colocar el balón cruzado lejos del alcance de Germán Mulek, y también ha tenido, lógicamente, esa pizca de suerte que tienen los genios para que el balón pegara en el palo y se introdujese en la portería argentina y no fuese fuera, por ejemplo.
Ha ajustado muy bien el disparo, ¿eh?
Golazo de Ricardinho, 10 goles para Ricardinho, 9 para Hasan Satay, el futbolista turco.
Mucho mérito también ahí, ¿eh?
Y 7 Gretson, los 3 máximos goleadores del Mundial. Luego con 6 está el futbolista de Mali, Mamadou Thiam.
Sale el jugador número 10. Ricardinho.
Va Ricardinho.
Okay, so obviously watching that, I don't know what it looked like across. I don't know what it looked like across your formats of the game, but are there any chats in there, Jeff? Is anything in there that?
I had some people send to me privately as well. So under physical, we from column over in Ireland, we had use of arms and body to protect the ball. Under technical, we had dribbling skills. We had passing, we had a high level of technical skills, and that's generally exhibiting high level of technical skills. We also had use of drag backs, and also we had use of toe pokes and different ways to manipulate the ball. We also had increased footwork and different level of skills, and from Catherine fielding, defensive shape and formations. Under psychology, I had a private one around supporting each other, being supportive on the pitch, and under social, celebrating as a team and listening to the guides.
Excellent, a good list. So it looks like there were some really good points in there. Myself and Adam come up with this list when we were working through the physical. So obviously some of the ones that have been said, there's some strength, speed, power, endurance, coordination, balance, agility, mobility and movement and flexibility. All things that we feel that physically a blind player can work on in their own programs to try and get themselves better. Technical ball manipulation, I think someone said that one really good. Controlling the ball, traveling with the ball, passing and shooting. Obviously there's a goalkeeping element of it, but we're not really focusing on that, but obviously just distribution and shot stopping. And psychological, so it's just some of the harder ones in there. It was spatial awareness and orientation, decision making, enthusiasm, adaptability, game understanding, concentration, communication, composure, mental toughness and dedication. And dedication is a really big, strong one for us over here, because we feel that, you know, the repetitive nature of some of the drills that you have to do to become a good footballer takes a lot of dedication and work. And social, and probably the most important one for us, cooperation, teamwork, empathy, fair play and respect. So looking at these areas, we've been talking about meeting a player for the first time, about training a player for the first time, and what those look like, the skills you have to develop to help a player get to a level. So just for a brief 30 seconds, try and think of something that you feel that are the main points that might slightly differ from these when working with a younger player or a new player for the first time. I can ask the coaching staff to have a think of that as well. It does differ.
I suppose, John, what I wanted to do to ask you, Adam and Uli, is the first time that you ever did any coaching, what was the main thing that you felt you needed to do first time? So, John, let's start with you. What was the, different to what's on there? What was the main thing you remember?
Well, that's a good question. I think the first thing I remember was not really understanding the blindness. And so I think my first real target for myself was to try and get to know the person and understand them and what their needs were and what they wanted to get out of their training. And then I adapted my sessions to suit that particular person. And then I felt like I learned a lot from that one person and developed my skills across the board, and developed all my different learning styles. So yeah, I would say that was my main priority. Just because, when you're coaching is not about me. It's not about what I want. It's about what the player needs. And so I feel that understanding the player is the most important thing for me.
Yeah, Matt Greenwood. Matt, great to have you joining us from Bickering Football Club. Matt talks about avoiding physical contact, tackling to begin with, and that's something that Adam will talk about, and focusing on ball familiarity. Adam, what was your first thing that you would think about, the first time you coached somebody?
A lot of it's similar to what John's just said. I think for me, the first thing that was apparent to me was trying to gain the players' trust in me, through like my communication, and trying to build their confidence through that. I think then you can kind of encourage players to do what you want them to do. I think as I've got older, it's more about assessing where they're at. And like John said, they have different personalities, they have different experiences before coming into blind football, and then adapting a style that suits them and their learning style to get them and to progress them through a pathway or just to make them a better person or football player, really.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Fully.
Yeah. Well, for me, I had, of course, many years of experience as a physical education teacher with blind people and doing all sorts of sports like alpine skiing with blind people and sailing and so forth. And for me, meeting a new player on the pitch, I was ticking very, very quickly, looking at where are they actually developmentally. That means basic things like how is their balance. What has come, of course, from Adam is to build up the trust through it's your voice, it's your whole demeanor, is how you approach people, the respect. All these things, they come very, very fast when you meet a blind person, and to try to really pitch the level where they are at. So you can find out very quickly, depending on the age, or if they are congenitally blind, or if they lost sight and have had some experience in sighted football. That all happens very quickly with a general talk, with the approach you have with them, and not to overload them. And bombard them with a whole new world. What comes quite often is that you find that, especially with younger people, that has come with a question a lady placed in the last session, and she talked about how do you deal with overprotectiveness, and that links in very much into this when you meet the person the first time that you a blind person that you can sense very quickly if they are assertive enough, if they ask questions, if they feel insecure, if they get easily out of balance too, and how they basically move. And if they are very scared, if they come from an environment where they've been overprotected and people haven't placed any stress on them before, or they don't know where they are in space and all this, you have to pitch, of course, very carefully, not overload them, and look very closely at what level they're at in their movements, in their balance, in their understanding, in their comprehension of what you're saying. Because many blind people, they say yes when you talk. Or I bet too, we talked about it before, Jonathan said before, because he talks very, very quickly, and that we have some people here with sighted people too, amongst our participants who would say yes and wouldn't actually ask questions because they don't want to put any stress on anyone, or they don't feel assertive enough. So there's a lot of things coming at you. But the basic thing Adam said before, to build up trust and to pitch and to assess, basically do a type of very quick assessment where they are and what you can expect from them with the ball, or where they are. Do they need to be placed even in your first talk close to the sideboard to have a reference point? Because a lot of them feel pretty lost if you take them somewhere on a big pitch somewhere in space. Okay, so very, very crucial. The first encounter, very crucial for developing trust and to get a good start with teaching blind football.
Lovely, thanks, Uli. We've got a couple of points which I think do look into the psychology of it. Dehandraj talks about building the confidence of the player. Pete talks about Pete, are you able just to share with us, just come on and chat with us through your point?
Hey guys, so yeah, I've brought up the point of understanding it's human first and athlete second perspective. So ensuring that it's a warm and a welcoming environment, that it's that social environment. I will generally, if I'm working with an athlete for the first time, I ensure that I've got another athlete there as well. So that way then there is the opportunity, especially during the likes of drinks breaks, so that there is that shared experience. There is the opportunity to just chat and discuss. I generally don't have a whole lot of one-on-one sessions with individuals for a first time, from my perspective at least.
Yeah, lovely. Pete, thanks very much, and thanks for sharing that. Francis Sebastian talks about making sure that they enjoy sport, which is really important. Catherine talks about breaking down skills, and I know that Adam and John, we're talking about it a little bit later. And Francis, I don't know whether you want to talk about this, and I think this is an area that all of you may come into, this overprotective parent, this environment where people don't think that their children should play this sport. Francis, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, thank you. One of the challenges that we face is with the administration here, because when we try to introduce the sport into schools, most school by administrations are very overprotective of the students, and they always bring up the cause that the children are going to get injured. So this is one of the challenges that we have. And to a certain extent, I find that the parents are ready to let go of their children. It's a child, they've never experienced this before, but once they come in and they find that we are creating an environment for them where the kids are safe and that we are taking care of their children and we are promoting the sport in the right way, they are willing to let go. But I think the biggest challenge for us is with the school administrations, making them understand the importance of the blind children being physically active through sports.
Brilliant. Yeah. Francis, thanks very much. And I think what you'll find is, we've certainly in the second half of this presentation, you'll find that certainly the 1v1, 2v2, the project that Adam will talk to you about actually will help you break down that with schools, because we're talking about a non-contact game. And the last comment from Florin was about building confidence and working part of a team. And you've got to remember that most blind people haven't been involved in team sports, and this may be the first time they've ever done a team sport. And so that's very different from being an individual. So this might give them a chance to be involved in that sort of team sport environment. So John, over to you, back to you.
Yeah, just on the point made earlier around, I think on the last online course, someone asked the question, would you try and teach them the fundamental basics of the game first, or would you let them go out and explore and find out for themselves? And I think what I've found with parents, especially when we engage with those and they come along to watch their child play, they feel a lot more comfortable when we've delivered the spatial awareness and helped them with their orientation, making it safe, taught them the kind of areas of the game we need them to learn. And then when they've established those qualities, then they move on and then develop the game themselves and enjoy it. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why when we spoke about that, that's why I would do it that way, not the other. And to be honest, guys, I wrote down some points here, but what you've come up with is far superior to what I've written. But yeah, just for fun and enjoyment, support, inclusive, and friendships. I think there for me is what we all get into football for in the first place. You know, you want to meet people, you want to enjoy yourself, and be supportive, and you want to feel included. And I really think blind football is a really good way of doing that. So, what makes a coach? If anyone wants to jump on and say what they think the effective blind football coaches need to come on. I mean, we all have our own personal perspective. Uli, I'm sure you could list a list of 100 things. What you feel that the most important things for a blind football coach are. Would you like to say something on this?
Well, first of all, yes, I think we should not forget, even though we are very specialized and we have a sport here, a lot of people in the main public finds it incredible that blind people can move freely into space and play football at all. I think it's important with this attribute is to have some passion for two things. I mean, one thing is that we're talking about football. And we have people who happen to be blind. They could be sighted. They could be sighted 5-year-olds. If you have the passion for football and you're a coach, you could coach professional football, all sorts of things. But you have to come from a basic understanding of general football first, and also have a passion for that. When you are new to our game, there comes, of course, the whole bit of how to deal with all the aspects of what a blind person has to deal with. And of course, we are not blind ourselves, but of course, it helps a lot if you are new to blind football to put a blindfold on yourself, do things to get a better understanding, do a lot of blindfold work. Try to get onto some other specialists, maybe go to a school, talk to some people who teach orientation mobility. They are in all countries, they are orientation mobility instructors, to have a better understanding of the development of blind people, how they develop, and how to then join that up with our passion and our general football knowledge. You will talk about the differences, of course, and the likes of sighted football and blind football. But I think the attitude is not that different towards general coaching, in a sense of that you have passion for the game, that you like working with people, that you open yourself. John, you say that all the time too, that you even though you and I and many of us who are working a lot, many years with blind people, and here in particular with blind football, we still want to learn. It is not a phrase. We learn every time we meet a new blind person, and that's the challenge, and that's the beauty of it too. When you meet new blind people who want to play football. So your whole when you say key attribute, it's basically being human and being with people, learning too from blind people. And somebody said too, of course, it helps when you meet people the first time, you as a coach too, to have also for the parents to have another blind person there who plays the game already. Jonathan, you showed in the first session very well how a blind person basically with you as a coach being there coaches somebody else. So that gives them the advantage to see to understand, well, look, another blind person like me can do it. But back to the question, what makes a good coach? For me, it is not much different to wanting to coach sighted football, wanting to work with people, being open, and then using anything you can to learn about blindness too, in a sense of how does blindness affect people's balance? How can it affect the coordination? What is being taught in blind schools and generally in sport, and to go sideways as well. There's so many things here now, but I think you don't have to change that much that you are worried using terms like "have you seen that?" or knowing that the person can't see, but that you don't change your language, that you relax yourself. You have a lot of people who are new here. Sometimes people are here too who met a few blind people and they think they know already everything. But to be just yourself and to ask the people questions too. You don't have to change much to start to being teaching with sighted people. Really, just stay open. Okay.
Thanks, Uli. I think what Uli's describing as well is that that holistic approach to coaching with because of the blindness, and I suppose if that's a great starting point for walking onto the pitch. So I suppose I'm going to ask Adam a question now, and I think I'm going to delve into the kind of the areas and the skills that a coach may need to be a good blind football coach. So Adam, working with me, he's the guide for our England team. I'm just going to ask him what he feels are the communication skills that he thinks are the most kind of important for him to know and understand as a coach.
Oh, Put me on the spot.
Sorry,
That's all right. I think like we got to remember that communication is like a two-way thing. So it's like Early's just said, like listening to the players is as important as your own communication. But for like a guide, for me, behind the goal is just being clear, concise, and having a purpose of what I want to say, but also be like proactive in my communication. So I'm trying to read what's going on before it's happened and make sure that my communication is like a step ahead of the action that's going to happen, if that makes any sense. But I think like what makes a good blind football coach is looking at the real technical details of making a person or a player better. I think sometimes it's overlooked, like we look at the session as a whole, coaches do, maybe in the game, and not focus on how to make an individual better within that session. And that's so important, especially in our country where we don't have many people playing the game. We have to utilize the players that we have, and we have to make sure that we make them better. So looking at the detail of where someone puts their foot in relation to the ball when they strike on goal, or how they can control the ball, that's so important.
Yeah,
for
and
me.
it does go back. It's a great point that, I mean, so many coaching sessions I see where the outcome of the session, if it's a shooting session, is to how many more goals can we score? And in reality, what a session should be about is how can we teach someone to be better at shooting the ball? So we wouldn't look at how many goals are scored. We look about, like you say, foot position, the movement patterns, how they're beating a player, and teach that individual how to do that properly before we move on. And regardless if we score more goals or not, we make sure that that person's developing in that session.
Huey, in the chat, Keon talks about a commitment to learn and evolve, and also the possibility of learning from other sports. But I think the key one is about that commitment to continue learning and try and evolve and listening to your athlete. And I think that sort of builds on the point you just made. What do they understand? Because of course, most of our athletes haven't seen someone kick the ball. So we've actually got to break that skill down and help them visualize it, even though they can't obviously visually see it. So it's how the coach helps that process.
Yeah, and I think it's like Early said earlier, or myself actually said, what does a player want to get out of what they're doing? If they want to get better and you know what they want, then you can help them. Yeah, some really good points there, Keon. And I think another really key attribute for us is because when you're coaching, you also become a guide in the game. And Adam will talk about this a little bit in the 2v2 game. But being analytical in your observation, it's a skill. So having a good technical understanding of what you're hoping to achieve from your session, making sure there's some really clear outcomes. Be aware of the surroundings, because obviously you can be the eyes and ears of that player in any certain session. So giving them a clear outline of what's around them. So creating pictures for them to train. And then I think Adam touched on it, understanding the mechanics of a skill or the component of what you're trying to teach, and what part of the foot does what. If you're learning how to toe poke, what part of your toe are you using to keep the ball down? What part of the ball are you hitting to make it go up? And then explaining this in a way that the players understand. I think Uli was talking earlier around that kind of, do they understand? Do they just say yes because you're a coach and they want to impress you, or can they demonstrate that understanding by delivering against how you're communicating, which is a skill in itself. And also probably the last thing, and it's again it may be a little bit too far forward into maybe the third session, but having game awareness. Understanding the tactics, understanding the phases of play that happen in the game, having that multidisciplinary approach, knowing what the player needs from a strength and conditioning coach or a goalkeeping coach, and how you can work together to get the right outcomes. But then as you move down the pathway into the smaller areas, then breaking down the main game, I always believe that if you can, even if you're working with one player, if you can paint a picture that this part of the drill is that you're playing at the back, and this is a long throw from a goalkeeper and you've got pressure in front of you from a striker and you need to receive the ball on your right hand side to be able to play out from the back, all of a sudden that boring session where you're just throwing a ball at a player becomes a real life experience for them, and that's when they generally learn the most. So I wrote this list down. It's pretty much everything that everyone's spoken about. And again, I think there's some really kind of important, maybe quite jokey ones here really, but you have to be able to organise. You're going to help support them. Empathetic for the player needs. Having a sense of humour in blind football, I've found, is a massive key component, because sometimes it's quite a hard game, and you need to know where you are and why you're doing it. You need to be a friend to a player. Sometimes a taxi driver, help them find their kit sometimes, and you need to be able to plan. And like I said, let's start organise what they're doing. Is there any more comments in the box, Jeff? Jeff. I'll take that for now. Okay, so we are going to have a 5-minute break. We'd like everyone to reconvene at 10 to whatever hour you're working towards. So have a quick drink and use the bathroom if you need to, and we will be back to start talking about the 2v2 game. Going to give you a 2-minute warning, and we will be starting in 2 minutes. Okay, so welcome back. Just before I move on, was there any questions from the first part of the second online coaching course? Jeff, is there anything, or can anyone read anything from the chat box if there's anything that anyone asked?
I'm just checking, Huey. No, nobody. Just one point from Luis, when he was talking about the importance of silence at the right time for the players so they can hear the ball. So that's creating the right environment for players and coaches being aware of that. But no other questions.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so just slightly moving on. Okay, so this second part, and the reason why I've asked Adam to come in is that as part of a new role working for the FA, Adam was given the task of designing a game with some support from myself to help develop the skills that are learned in that individual basis, then progress it up to bigger numbers. So one on his own, 1v1, 2v2, and maybe bigger into 3v3, 3v4. Adam's skill set, just a little bit about Adam. He's worked with the England squad for the last 6 years, but he's been working at the Royal National College for the Blind for the last 11, and he's a qualified teacher working with people with vision impairments. So he's got real good skill knowledge, and why he's so good for us on this project is because he's really been exposed to the pathway from really young children learning the game all the way up to the senior squad. So it's great that Adam can be on today. I think he's going to deliver a really good presentation and talk to you about the benefits of learning blind football through a small-sided game, which not only really benefits the player, but it benefits the coach as well. Okay, Adam.
Thanks. Well, I'd just firstly like to say thank you to IBSA for allowing me to come on here. So thank you, Uli. Thank you, David, for allowing me to come on, and Jeff as well. Yeah, like John said, well, I'll probably refer to him a lot as Pewee because that's how I know him. But if I call him John, obviously his name is. I was given the role back in 2019, and obviously with the pandemic, it's been quite slow to set up. The remit that I was given by John and the people at the FA was to develop a small-sided version of blind football that could help develop a player's skills and techniques. So we had to introduce them to the basic techniques of controlling, traveling and passing the ball using a small-sided game. So when I talk about this game, we've split it up into 3 phases and 3 stages of the game to fit every player's needs. And like John just said, we have a way of coaching in our country with a blind player where we work one-to-one in a lot of different areas of the UK, purely because we don't have many people playing the game. And so I feel that this game, Project B1, bridges the gap from individual player work with a coach to the kind of England squad or the international game. And where Project B1 fits in, players can dip in and out of that at any point to kind of further their development in the game. So next, please, Pui. So phase 1 is a 2v2 game, or it can be 1v1 or 2v1, like John said. But it's a basic targeting game. And what it does, it introduces the players to all the basic techniques they need to learn to be good at blind football, but in a small-sided, safe version of the game. And what I've developed with this game is a resource pack where coaches, teachers, any professional working with a visually impaired footballer can work through a resource, which is kind of stepped in a sequence to make that blind person better or feel more comfortable playing blind football. It works on all of the attributes that we've discussed in the chat earlier and in the presentation earlier. So what makes a good blind footballer? But the game Project B1 also helps to make a good coach or a good guide, and all of those different attributes that we spoke about previously as well. So from phase 1, what we would see a player being good at and how we know that we can move that player on is that they're able to demonstrate good control techniques, good fundamental movements and orientation and spatial awareness, be competent with traveling with the ball, have the ability to be able to pass and shoot. We see that as being very similar in our game, and the ability to be able to manipulate the ball and turn with the ball when we need them to. And then we feel that once they can do all of those and they can demonstrate that in this targeting game, then we can move them on. So if you could go on to the next slide, please, Pui. So this was taken back in 2017. This is our senior team playing the game. The pitch is 20 by 10. I'll go through the rules of it in just a moment. Just thought it'd be a good opportunity for you all to see it first. The yellows are working together in their area to then try and pass the ball into the guide when the guide asks for the ball. If they score a goal, they retain the ball and try and then score again. So I'll just let this run through. I won't talk over this too much. So if you just notice as well, there's that element of attacking and defending. We're bringing in tactical elements of the game, where obviously at the minute the reds are defending, trying to track the ball. The yellows are retaining it and then trying to look for an opening to play into the guide.
Adam?
Yes.
Yeah. So the guide in this small game is, but at what stage is he calling? Is he calling?
Yeah.
All the time? Yeah.
No. So there's a rule in a minute. There's a set of rules that go with this game, Uli, and I'll go through that.
Oh, okay.
So as you've just seen, for those of you on the call that might be visual impairment, this next slide is just a picture of what the pitch looks like with two teams, and I'll just go through the rules of it now. So we would preferably like the game to be played in a 20 by 10 area, so 20 by 10 meters, with a 2 meter targeting zone at the end of each pitch. This is where the guys would stand. The game's non-contact, and there's a halfway line restriction. So in the clip that you just saw, the yellows could stay in their zone and the reds couldn't come in to tackle them. They had safe possession of the ball. They were able to keep it. They weren't under pressure. There's 5 scoring zones within this. They are at the coach's discretion how you mark them out, but we would like, or in our country, we keep the middle goal the same size as the IBSA standard goal. So for when we look at phase 2 and phase 3, that kind of transition is consistent throughout. This is when a goal is scored. So this goes on to your point now, Uli. A goal is scored when the guide asks for the ball. The guide must then stand still and receive the pass through the necessary gate or goal. So in this, in the session that you just saw then, in the clip that you just saw then, the 2 guides were our goalkeepers. They would have been telling the players who have got the ball, maybe to take it left or right, or pass it, retain it, keep it, it's not on. All those different types of communication a guide needs when they stand behind the goal. But the minute that they ask for a pass or a shot, you can make up the words you want to suit the needs of your group. We use pass. Once the guide says pass, they have to pass the ball then. And then that guide has to stand still. So the guide isn't doing all the work by moving up and down the line. Once they ask for the ball, they have to stand still, and then it's up to the players to hit the guide. Otherwise, the guide is doing all the work, and the players can just pass it wherever. The guides can only communicate to the team in possession. So what we're trying to do then is have a holistic approach to defending and tracking from the defending point of view. We feel in our country, and John will probably speak a little bit more about this, or our goalkeeping coach would, our goalkeepers have got to be a goalkeeper to stop shots. They are also incredibly important in the guiding point of view. But what we'd like our players to do is take the ownership of defending first and track the noise of the ball. So that's why we've asked in this game that guides are only talking to the team with the ball. Another really important rule, and this is where we feel that this helps the technical development of players, is that the ball can't go above shin height in the game or above knee height. We want the ball to be played along the floor. Otherwise, it can get a bit dangerous if players are launching the ball in the air to get it to the guide. We want to try and play through defenders and not really over them. Obviously, that would happen in the full format of the game. The middle column here that I'm reading off would be what the players would be working on in this environment. It encourages listening skills. It promotes teamwork. It challenges the players' skills with and without the ball. So we're challenging players' defending skills within this. It allows the players the opportunity to bring all of those technical components together into this game. But what it also does is help the coaches and the guys. So it helps the coach to understand the guiding process, what words work, what words don't work. It encourages the coach also to look at tactical principles within this safe environment. So when we haven't got the ball, can we stay very narrow and together and protect the goal and protect the guide or the goalkeeper? And when we have the ball, can we spread out and make different passing angles and different dribbling options within that? So that's what phase 1 is. there is another element to phase one, and this is where in our country it becomes really important that we implement this. So could you move on to the next slide, please, Puri? We call this the power play ruling. So what you see now on screen is the 5 scoring zones. So you'll notice the scoring zone number 3 is bigger than 2 and 1. So the reason why we call it a power play ruling is that because players are in a safe environment, we can then in our country, I think there's Duncan Gilchrist on the call from Stoke City who's implementing this game as we speak. We know that in Stoke, for example, there might be a 20-year-old wanting to play, there might be a 14-year-old, there might be an 11-year-old, and how can we make a game or make a session that's inclusive to all of them without segregating them? So that's why we've made it non-contact. Now we know that within that, you would have to make considerations for where the players are at ability-wise. But like Uli said at the start of the call, and I think Peters has put it in the chat as well, it is very common in our country that a player rocks up to a session and there's no other blind player there. And how can this person have a meaningful experience playing under blindfold when it's just him and a coach or her and a coach? And that's really hard to replicate. So what we've looked at doing as well is providing a lot of our football clubs with the equipment. So if there was a brother or sister accompanying this player to the session, that they could put the blindfold on as well, and they could have a game of Project B1, but we would just change the ruling in terms of the scoring zones. So for example, me and John have done this a few times in our senior sessions where we would challenge some of the players to a game on 2-on-2, but we would make the game fair. We would let the players only score in zone 3, so the smaller goal, and me and John would have the luxury of scoring the whole width just to make the game fair. And then everyone is getting something out of it then as well. So yeah, next slide, please. So this is just a little bit more about the power play ruling. I've pretty much just explained it then, but this is where you can use the goals, make the goals bigger or smaller to kind of allow for the players in your session where they might be at a different age or stage to other players in the group. So in our game, we would call that maybe a grassroots player, a development talent player to an elite senior squad player, and across all of the abilities within that. So yeah, next slide, please. Is there any questions so far, John, Puri? I'm talking too quick. I'm conscious that I do this quite quickly, so, or Jeff.
Yeah. So yeah,
I can't see
there's
the
no.
chat box.
That's all right. Yeah. So Pete speaks about in this version of the game, you're using kickballs as the goals rather than having a physical goal. But I think that you don't actually have to play this game with the balls, do you? You can play it on an open pitch. As long as you've got the parameters marked out and the players know, the players know the area. So just want to explain that, and also just saying that, your sound's pretty low, Adam. I'm not quite sure what's happened there.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that's what Rennie has said. So you might have to talk out a bit louder.
I'll try and talk a little bit louder then.
That's
yeah,
ironic,
Pete,
that, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, being a guide and not being very loud.
Sorry, and just the other thing to make point, because Francis has said, can you speak about a beginning player? But this game is about the beginner, isn't it?
Yeah,
this is about a non-contact beginning game, so they can begin. So yeah, you might just want to clear that up.
Just before Adam jumps on that, it is obviously, and it's all the tools and the rules and everything have been put in place to make a game safe. But you can play this high level even in phase 1, and I think we're going to show you some videos. I think you saw one at the front of this second part of this presentation, where we had England senior players playing the game as Adam's explaining it, even though it isn't the most basic format of the game. And I'll show you later how we progress that on.
Yeah, and just last thing, sorry, lads, that Pete just I just clarified. So I think that he's saying that this version of the game is adaptable based on the environment available, and I think that's right. You know, if you can play this indoors, you can play it outdoors, as long as it's played safely and you've got enough people. If you are playing indoors, maybe down the side, to be able to let people understand the parameters or the players who are playing, then it can be played virtually anywhere, can't it?
Yeah, 100%.
We have a term in England called jumpers for goalposts, and I think the whole idea was that as long as you had a couple of blindfolds or some blind players and two people to help with the guiding, you could play a game with. You don't need cones, you don't need goals, you just need an area to play.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, we feel that this can be set up in any environment that you have. Obviously, in the UK, I'm only speaking from experience, but we have 2 blind pitches in the whole of UK, one in Hereford and one at St George's Park. So it's then making a game that's accessible to everyone, no matter where they are in our country. So the markings that you saw on the video are just flat markers, which are tactile. So if the players did run over them, they would be aware of where the halfway line is. Similar to goalball using string and tape, we feel it would be slightly better if we use flat markers. They're a little bit more robust, and players can feel that as well. But yeah, it can be set up in a sports hall. It can be in any environment, really, as providing that you go through those necessary steps that I'm sure John spoke about in the first session, where you're getting the players used to the environment that you're using. So yeah, this is now phase 2. And this is where we would say in England, it would be up to the coaches' kind of discretion on how they take the game forward, depending on what level the group is at and how quickly they are getting the technical skills in this game. This is where you can open up the pitch, so you don't have to have a halfway line restriction. You can send one player in to go and tackle the ball, and then win it back and play into the target zone. You can introduce a goal if you need to. But within this element of the resource and the project, we would then start to introduce what VOI is, and how you can build a session around phase 2 of the game. For the players then, we're working on listening skills, not only from the guide, but from their teammate and the opposing player. So if someone's running at them and saying VOI, how can they interpret that information, use the technical skills that they've developed in phase 1 to move the ball and pass into the target zone or into the goal. Ball skill development, and this is huge now. So I know that John touched upon the very basics of the game in the first coaching session that you guys have done. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but how you can then really distinguish the technical and skill development of your players, how you can challenge them to be better. This then becomes, for me, I really love the attacking side of blind football, and probably the reason why me and John work quite well together is John's very defensive in some of his thinking, and I like to attack. So for me, in this phase of phase 2, if we were to look at the wider part of the game, this is about creating opportunities to score, and creating attacking scenarios within that. Also for me, one thing I think is missed by a lot of coaches when we look and we delve deep into the tactical element of the game is that we just feel that blind football is just about attacking and defending, when for me, there's a big part in the middle called a transition. So the transition from attacking to defending to attacking is really important. And within this part of it, this is hugely important, and this starts to teach players on that transitional understanding and how they can cope with that. The elements for the coaches is that player interaction again, developing the skills and their techniques, and understanding different tactical elements of this game. So if you go on to the next slide.
Can I say something? Can you hold this again? Can you back to the pitch now? Just to add something from my side, we have a lot of this is great to see. The 2 against 2 here. Just the thing on the side, we have a lot of situations in the world where countries are quite advanced. They don't have blind schools, and they have students, or we're talking about girls who want to play football, who are isolated in integrated settings and who like to play football. And this is a great example here where you only need one blind person here. And you can have schoolmates who are sighted, who are willing to play 2 against 2 with blindfold. And you have an isolated girl who is 14, 15 years of age. All the brothers, everybody sighted playing football. They want to play football. They heard about blind football, and they have no access to anywhere to play football. So this would be a prime example, 2 against 2, small pitch. A few girlfriends or a few friends who want to put a blindfold on, where you can start developing a game, play blind football. So this is a great example. Instead of staying isolated and saying, well, we never have a national side, where there are too few of us who are blind, I can't travel far. So you can do this sort of type of thing here in any school in the world somewhere, where you have an isolated blind student being integrated, being in an integrated setting. Yeah, just a little remark here.
Yeah, and I think earlier as well, it's a great point, because I think it's so common for a blind person to try and be integrated into a mainstream session. With what you're saying, then that blind person becomes the expert in the game, whereas before in PE, they may be shoved into the corner or not able to access football or sport in their school. Whereas this game will allow them to be the main person in the game, if that makes sense, the expert in the game, and the players and their friends are the ones that are learning off that blind person, which is so important.
Yeah, can I just add to that, Uli, because that's a fantastic point you bring up, because I was talking to a player who's in the pathway, and he's at mainstream school. He's one of the only blind people at mainstream school, and they've actually introduced this game with his peers who are sighted, and they're non-contact, but they've put the face masks on, and it's flipped the way that he is seen with his peers, because where normally he's at a disadvantage, the young lad I'm talking about is now at the advantage. He's got all of the orientation skills, he's got all the skills in football, and his friends now are the ones who are being really tentative and can't locate the ball and whatever. And now they begin to slightly understand what it's like to be blind, and also then marvel at the skills that he's got. So a fantastic point, really.
Yeah, well, this is, we often have a lot of rhetoric, like, I don't know, like assertiveness and blah, blah, all sorts of things. But here you have, when you talk about this, great example, Jeff, this is in a true sense empowerment. Right?
Yeah.
That's empowering a blind person, turning the whole thing around. And this is, by the way, for all of us who work with blind football, what we keep seeing with blind people, that they are empowered, that they can say to the sighted world, look what we can do. You have difficulties with this and stuff, and we're turning around the so-called helplessness and the neediness of people with a disability into a powerful tool where we can show the world, how skillful and what we can do, what a person can do who's blind. So this fits in a practical sense and perfectly in all the things we are saying with blind football. When you look at this 2 against 2, a person being isolated and to empower a blind person, a young blind person. Also, when it comes to what we said before or last time when somebody talked about what do we do about overprotectiveness, here you go. Empowerment, showing the parents what the person can do. Okay, and you turn the whole thing around. Okay, great.
Yeah, and sorry, Adam, just a couple of questions that have been asked. Steve Jones got kicked out of Zoom briefly, so he's just talking about tackling. Did you mention that?
No, I haven't mentioned. I've just seen in the chat that people are talking about.
Yeah, can you explain that when you get to it, please?
Yeah, I mean this is a part of the game. Obviously, void tackling is a huge part of the game. We know our game is really physical. And for a young person and for parents watching their child maybe take their first steps into a blind game or taking their child to a blind football match for the first time, they may feel, oh God, this is a bit scary. I don't want my child to get hurt. But what we're doing with tackling and what we mean by this is if John had the ball and I was defending against John, if I could get a hand on him and say voy and tackle him, then John would have to pass the ball off or I would have the ball back. And then I would have possession of the ball. So we're not getting that physical contact, those big hits that do happen in blind football straight away that may put a player off playing or a parent off their child playing for the first time. We're just slowly integrating what tackling is and what voy is. Francis is
exactly. Touch rugby. Yeah, exactly. That's a good example. Exactly, that's the way it is.
I mean, go on. Sorry, John.
Bendy, I was just going to say that. So obviously, when we were creating this game, we needed a structure and a kind of almost like a rule book, so anyone who would never know anything about blind football could start playing a game.
Yeah.
But in reality, what we were really keen to do is make the game whatever it needed to be to suit the player that was playing. So, as an example, you could have 2 experienced blind footballers playing against 2 novice blind footballers, and it might be that the only 2 that can make a tackle could be the 2 experienced players, but the other ones, don't. It might be that only the person without the ball can enter into the opposition half, so they can put pressure on the ball. It could be that instead of tackling, like Adam said, it's tackling. So if you touch them, they've got 2 seconds to pass the ball to someone in their team, or the ball turns over. The goals can be any width you want them to be to support a player scoring more goals, as opposed to making it very difficult. So even though, Adam, you're going to continue to go through the rules, I think it's really important for everyone to say that we're trying to give you some structure, but in reality, you'll know your players. We talked about this at the start. You understand your players, understand what they want to get from this. Rules like, you have to have a pass before you go forward. So you start introducing that teamwork, that movement pattern to be able to create shapes and tactical information that's going out from the guide. There's so much that you can learn from this version of the game.
Yeah, 100%. If you could go on to the next slide. So the outcomes that we and exactly what the top line just says about what John's just said, the phase of this this part of Project B1 is really fluid. It's really adaptable, and the rules need to suit the group that you're working with and the players' needs within that. It's not about rushing them through the phases because you want to get to a game at the end. It's about taking those steps to make sure that they learn and they get better as they do it, or just that they have fun whilst playing this game. So what we would want from our coaches in the UK at the end of phase 2 is an understanding of using the word voy and making sure that they're safe when they do that, progressing the technical components of movement, passing, control and traveling with the ball, and just understanding the game elements of phase 2. like I said, we can lift the restrictions on the halfway line and different things. It's really up to the coach's discretion on how we move the game forward in phase 2. So could you go to the next slide, please? So put what's phase 2 again, but phase 2 is really about developing the skill acquisition. So from the very basic elements of the game, working it on to hopefully producing international footballers. And I know that John touched on the technical components on the bullet points in the previous course, but this is where Project B1 can really help, and then kind of set your players aside from the more novice or grassroots players. So in phase 2, we look at controlling, what does that foot position like, controlling the ball from different angles. Can you make a different barrier with your leg to control the ball quickly? Some of the top players obviously do a slight kind of K shape when they control the ball, and that's really effective. Controlling on the move is hugely important. The clip that we saw earlier, the way that the Brazilians were moving the ball, they're all controlling the ball on the move, and that's so important to be a top player or a top team. Turning with the ball just isn't back and forth now. It's shifting the ball and sliding the ball to create different angles to pass. You're looking at dragging the ball back, to make different shooting opportunities or to evade the defender. Passing the ball doesn't just come from a static ball, passing it now into the target. It's about shifting the ball to pass, maybe passing on the run, reverse passing, so moving one way to pass back a different way, and the decision-making process within that, and challenging your players now. When's the right time to pass? When's the right time to travel with the ball? And this is what phase 2 does for a player. You're kind of that psychological element. And for me, if we were to go back so many slides, when John had the 4 elements of the game, the 4-corner model, it's no surprise that the psychological part had the most points in, because as we all know, blind football is hugely like psychological, in terms of we're taking a sense away from a player, and we're still asking them to perform a sport that is so difficult to play, even when you're sighted. So that decision-making process in phase 2 shouldn't be overlooked, and should be really developed. And I think that's probably then what sets out those really good coaches to like maybe average coaches and that. So dribbling with the ball becomes multi-directional. You have to create space then to exploit it, which is so important. Movement, not just moving forwards and backwards and sideways. It's about the pace in which you move, your foot speed as you do it, making sure that your feet stay in the V to cut out the ball, and then also working with your teammate to create, if you have the ball, create space with your movement, or to move in sync to stop an attack or to stop the ball coming through. Spatial awareness then becomes more and more developed. So you're looking at how to use the guides, how to evade the opponents, how to look after your teammates, and working in that environment. And like we've all said throughout all of this, what works for one doesn't work for everyone. These are just, then obviously everyone knows what voy is, but integrating what is too late and too soon and what is just right, that's a massive part of our game. And teaching voy isn't something that should be overlooked. And it's something that we would spend a lot of time on in this game. If you go on to the next slide. And then it's just about developing a session then that works on all of these technical attributes within phase 2 of the game. So throwing a ball, the player has to get on it with fundamental movements. What movement is that? How do they control that ball, dependent on the pass, the weight of the pass, the angle of the pass. And then once they've controlled it, where do they travel to and how do they travel there? Do they exploit the space that is in front of them? Do they go slow and change side to side to make some space to exploit it using different turns. And then can they have an outcome at the end, either a pass or a shot? And then we're all developing all of those attributes into one then. So yeah.
Adam, can I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
So we've got a lot of coaches who are on the call who are either new to the game or will be working with players who are new to the game.
Yeah.
How quickly, and you may have answered this already, but just from my understanding, how quickly could you move to phase 1 and maybe phase 2? I know you said it depends on the player, but are you talking about a couple of sessions after they've got the orientation right and they've got an understanding? But what would you do in your experience, and John and Uli as well?
For me, I mean, every time I deliver this as a CPD sessions to coaches, I'm asking to play phase 1 straight away, play the game straight away, and this doesn't go against what John has said, but there's a reason for that. So play the game first, see where the players are at and what they need to work on, and then take them out of that game environment to work on those technical skills. Obviously, the first thing you would do in any session would be to orientate the player in the environment that you're working on. But phase 1 is all, because we've made the pitch and we made the game non-contact, we can work on those elements of controlling the ball, passing it. And if there's something that they're not getting, so if their V-shape with their feet isn't right, then maybe take them out of the game, work on them individually, work on that skill for a little bit, and then put them back in the game to see how they develop that. And then it's like a two-way. Yeah.
So for those, sorry, I was just saying, coaching.
You wouldn't do any sort of coaching with them first. I'm not sure I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, how I've been delivering this game to our coaches that are working with clubs is that the first thing that I get them to do after the fundamental movements part and putting the blindfold on is making them play the game, because they see how hard the game is.
They can see them, can't they?
Pardon?
Yeah, but they can see the game though, can't they?
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm saying is seeing, and this is a session where the players are at to start with, and then you can, once you've seen where they need to work on, then teach them and then coach them from there.
Yeah. So in coaching terms, that sort of whole,
yeah,
where you see what have they got, what area do you need to work on specifically, and then maybe go back to the game again. Okay.
Yeah. And this isn't like, I would say if you had an hour session, maybe play this game for 20 minutes, but the other 40 minutes are working on the skill that John said, was like looking at their fundamental movements, looking at how they control the ball, looking at how they pass it, but then still see if they can play the game within that as well.
Yes, and Ollie, what would you look at?
Well, I think it's great, and it's a good way of starting all this. For me, personally, for me, it's very important before people even touch the ball is to assess and to work on orientation, mobility on the pitch. That means for players without the ball to get to feel safe in space. There's so much to come at them for skill development. But if a player doesn't know where he is, and if he doesn't find reference points like the sideboards or acoustical reference points to run, say, to 4 people on a call or whatever without the ball first, because you find a lot of blind people who haven't moved into space quick on different speeds and all this. So if you don't feel basically safe on the pitch without the ball first, it can become quite a lot to work with the ball, and very complex. So for me personally, when I coach, when I have young or new people, I make sure that they have good orientation first without the ball. moving on command, different directions, left, backwards. You'll find that many congenitally blind people too, they have difficulties running backwards, just without the ball, and changing direction. So I would place in the beginning probably a lot more emphasis on also working without the ball.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think what's interesting is, Adam, you've got a big thumbs up from Pete, who loves the way that you're looking at the intervention of the game. But I think what it does teach, I think what we're not trying to say, Adam, John, Uli, we're not trying to get everybody to coach in the same way.
Yeah. Because
you would all have your different approach to the game. What we're saying is, here's some of the fundamental things you need to be aware of. Now you need to go away and practice and see what best works for you and your players.
Yeah. Remembering we've all agreed, I think, from the start to finish, is that it's understanding your player and your player's needs.
Absolutely,
if the player can't pass a ball at all and never control the ball, it's probably right to teach him how to do that before you play. If you've had a one-to-one interaction with a footballer and this is his first experience of any game, 100% get him in there and let him get exposed to it so he can learn. But like you say, 100% right, Jeff. You know, it's one of those things that these are just tools. This whole game is a tool for people to learn to do something the way they want to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, 100% agree.
Is Omar got his? Can somebody
try to mute him?
Can we try and mute him? Right. Sorry. I just thought that was useful to bring up, Adam.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's a great point. And like John and Uli have said, that it's all dependent on where, like, assessing the player first and where you think they need to develop.
And sorry, just one more question that's just come in. Is there one, and I think maybe Uli's already answered this, but Francis speaks about, would there be, what's the key basic skill you need to focus on before you introduce the ball? And I think it's orientation, Uli, isn't it? Where are you playing? What's the area? Can you have those fundamental movements?
Yes, well, I think it's. I'm coming from the general teaching in blind schools, and you'll find, say, if you have typically blind people, say, in schools, they just stand. They don't move. They just wait for instruction or something. We want to, through the blind football, we want to encourage people to this is their area, this is their space, and they need to feel comfortable in that space. Once they do that, we can, as we go along, focus more and more on particular ball skills and all sorts of things. But it's the basis, like a table with 4 legs. If you have 3 legs, you can't. The table isn't, is falling to pieces. You can't develop the ball skills, I feel, if you don't have the basic feeling of that where you are in space. Because the big difference to all other safe blind sports, including goalball, is that you don't have to travel into space. This is the big thing we have in blind football. And all the things which go with it. So if the fundamental orientation in the room, the spatial awareness, if that isn't there, if that isn't guaranteed, then people will not feel comfortable traveling with the ball and stuff, So this is why I'm so adamant on the orientation mobility part as a part of blind football here.
Yeah, and I think that the key thing for all the coaches who are on the call is that, if you haven't got those fundamental movement skills, you won't be able to play the game. So you've got to be some work on those fundamental movement skills first of all.
Yes.
Good. Right. Sorry, Adam. A good discussion there. And if anybody wants to post, then please carry on. But back to phase 3. Sorry, Adam.
Yeah, no problem. No, it's fine. So phase 3. Consolidates everything that has come before it in phase 1 and phase 2. So all of the technical elements, all of the skill acquisition, all of the fundamental movements, the spatial awareness, orientation, all of those things now we're putting together and I'm sure that a lot of countries play a 2v2 with goalkeepers and guides, and this is essentially what this is. Within this now, the pitch doesn't have to be 20 by 10. It can be if you're wanting your players to work on turning elements and keeping the ball close. If you want to go on half a blind pitch, which is 20 by 20, that's also fine. It's just whatever works for you in your environment with the facilities that you have. The game now in phase 3 in the small-sided full format of the game would take on IBSA rules that you can find obviously on the IBSA webpage. And we'll be looking at working with Mariano. I've worked with Mariano, the referees coordinator, to come up with different ruling which he would see fit to make this game work. So it could be if there is a foul. In some countries, they go straight onto an 8-meter penalty. I know that they do that in Argentina. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mariano, I think he's on the call. But you can kind of, this is where we'd see a referee being involved. And this is a good introduction to bringing new referees into the game as well, maybe. They don't have loads of players to look after. We all know how hard it must be for a referee to referee a blind football match, but this can introduce them to this as well. For the players, it's really working on their listening skills. So not only do they have to listen to the guide and their teammates, they also have to listen to the goalkeeper's information as well, and that's really important, as you know. This is where we'd want the players to interpret the guide's information into performing it. So we're shooting on cue, moving into space, which the guide tells you to go to. That's so important. And this is what phase 3 does for a player. Obviously, the skill development, we're adding in shooting techniques. So I know that John was talking about earlier about how you can strike a ball with the laces, with the side foot, with your toe. It's looking at choosing the right technique for the right time, depending on where you are in relation to the goal. So if you're wider, you might want to use your laces to strike. If you're through on goal and straight at goal, it might be a toe, because that's the most powerful way of shooting. We're adding the goalkeeper in now. So for us, this is massive in our country, because we get to introduce new goalkeepers to the game for the first time, not throwing them into a full-size version of the game. We're using them in this format of the game, and they get to understand what blind football is at this level. It's massively working on the guides techniques now as well, and how you can support your players in the game. I don't think we have a video of this. I mean, I think this is there any more slides, John?
No, that's, no. I was just going to show them something else.
Yeah. The last thing I probably want to say, and just thank everyone for listening and all your questions. We know that this game is played. We know that there are countries playing the 2v2 game, similar to phase 3. The reason why we feel that it really works in our country is that we break it down into small chunks, which is some people have been putting on the chat, and we can address all of those. I wouldn't say they're problems, but those issues that arise, and we can identify and sort them through Project B1. When me and John come up with the game, and it was more John than me, to be honest with you, we looked at a game that we could develop and fit into our senior squad's philosophy. So don't want to give too much away, but the style in which our first team played, we can implement this, or we can implement that into Project B1. So a young blind player who may be 7 or 8 is learning blind football for the first time. We introduce them to Project B1, but within that at each stage they are learning our philosophy, they're learning our DNA right through until hopefully they play for England one day. And that's really important and powerful, and we get to do that. And John has given me the opportunity to be able to shape that. So that's so important for us.
But Adam, I think I've got one question and then one observation.
Yeah.
One question is, how do you restart the game when the ball goes out over the touchline?
Yeah.
So how would you do that? And then I'll do the observation.
So in phase 1 and phase 2, we make it quite flexible. We know that there might not be the sideboards that to play on. So if the ball goes out on the side, we would just give the team who lost the ball back, because we don't want our players to be in fear of having the ball. We want them to learn. It's their opportunity to learn and become familiar with the ball. When we get into phase 3, that's when we would adopt the kind of IBSA rulings for the full format of the game. So if it went out on the side, we'd give it back to the opposition team. And we would do that with the goalkeeper. So the goalkeeper would start each time. So if in phase 3, if the ball went out on the side and the Reds kicked it out for here, the green goalkeeper would restart the play.
Bendy, and I think the reason why we do that, you have multi-balls in the goals and things like that, is that it increases the amount of touches that player gets from a multi-ball system. So from long throws to passes. So in the full side get of the game, obviously hits the board, so it stays in place. So the player can make a mistake and it can go out of play, but that's fine. But here it's about controlling, receiving, passing, and moving with the ball. It's not about using the board. So I think it gives them a really good opportunity to practice that by having repeated throws over and over and repeated passes over and over, which is like the game.
Yeah.
And another question, is the B1 project resource pack available to download on the FA website?
There are elements of it on the FA website on a campaign called Football Your Way. It is something that I think might be available in the future. We wanted to make it a hard resource, like a resource pack that we could give to teachers, and it would be like a booklet. We'd also want to make that kind of braille. Sorry.
Well, Adam might not really know this, but being on the committee myself, I kind of do. We're looking to introduce a level 2 into the coaching manual, so maybe progressing the game on to this type of environment. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of this stuff will be integrated into the IBSA, into the second IBSA pack, which means that people will get access to this stuff. So
great.
And this recording will be online after this, so they can always go back to this.
Yeah, and just to add to that, just for everybody, can I just say that goes onto the FA website, and just say that again. So it's www.thefa.com. What would be and what section do they need to go down to get some of this resource?
It's called a Football Your Way campaign.
So Football Your Way campaign, and I think because I've gone on there and I've used it, I think you'll get some really good tips on there and explain some of the stuff that Adam spoke about. And just to say, Adam, my other observation is that for us in England, it is about identifying the next player, but the real emphasis on this is about providing a team game for people to play, and it could just because they're going to be a grassroots player. I do no more than that, but just play grassroots and love the game.
We all know that the boarding for a full-sided game costs something in the region of €20,000, and the goals are expensive, and these guys just want to have a game to play, and if it can be at the lowest level, that's fine.
So it's for the very best players, but it's also aimed at players who just want to play the game and have and play this great game that we've got.
We hope that loads of people fall in love with blind football through this game, and if they stay playing Project B1, fantastic. If they progress through, that's also great as well. But we've created a new game that hopefully blind people in our country can fall in love with and enjoy playing blind football in this format.
Brilliant. I think, Pewee, the last slide is questions. I think we've got 9 minutes for questions. If anybody else has got anything else to say or ask any other question.
It actually wasn't, Jeff. There was a few more slides about how to integrate.
Oh, good. Sorry, yeah, sorry, mate. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But I will. But I'm quite conscious of the time we want. If anyone wants to ask some questions, we want to make sure they get a chance. So, this is the video you saw at the start, and Adam touched on the point that even though this is the most basic format of the game, phase 1, we worked on this in terms of we wanted to learn our players how to track the ball and to stop the ball from a tactics perspective, getting down the wings in a game that we were going to be playing in the future. So we worked on very limited success to start with, but we started working on these two players here, trying to get into a flat line to protect the guide. But they weren't moving their fundamental movement weren't quick enough, and they weren't listening to the guiding very well. So as you can see, as the game progresses, the yellows start switching play to make sure that these guys in red start moving around. But their movement is a bit too overstepped, so they're still getting the ball through the gaps or through their legs even. But as it progresses and we start coaching how to play with each other, you start seeing that they start closing up the gaps between the lines and through the center, and they become more successful as the game starts playing through. That was me going in and coaching then. So this is where we start getting better outcomes of tracking and controlling the ball.
Yeah, and hopefully online, this will be when people will be able to download this online, that people will be able to, people will be able to see the proper speed of it.
Yeah, and I'll move it on quickly to see that video. This is now when we've turned the pitch horizontally. So instead of having it widthways, we've gone lengthways. And then we started working on a similar kind of training session where we were either trying to work on, can we play through passes through defenders, or can we stop long throws and long passes getting through our defensive unit? So we kind of integrated into games. So we, instead of having guides, we had strikers. So we've got a striker instead of a goal. We've got a goalkeeper. So we're playing the ball through, trying to get it into the player's feet so he gets a free opportunity to get a 1v1 with the goalkeeper. Or you're trying to stop, your two defensive units to stop the ball getting through to a striker. So you can work on whatever you want to. You can move this to a really high level. And it's great if you've got particular tactics you want to work on, you're breaking it down into small components. Where it's really understandable. Yes, there would be more players on the game, but we're really working with the attacking unit or the striking unit, and this is how we kind of establish our unit play. And the last video is where we integrate maybe phase 2 and maybe an element of phase 3, where we allow the players one player to go and put pressure on the ball when it's thrown out. So then the picture becomes different. So they have to do a bit more movement on the ball. Which leaves you physically outnumbered at the back. So the back man has to track with his goalkeeper better. And there's so much you can do with just this 2v2 game. I just wanted you to see how we've progressed the game from being at its basic form, still using its basic principles, but then moving it on into the elite environment. These are England players. They're good players, and they enjoy playing in this format. So.
John, just to say, David very kindly has posted the link on the chat box for everybody. And there are some really good resources about how you can make the game easier and harder. So you might find that's really useful. Just before, there's no questions at the moment. David, have you got the date of the next handy? Have you got the date of the last workshop?
Yeah, just a couple of things before we conclude. Thank you very much, Jonathan, Jeff, Uli, for taking part and for sharing your knowledge with us, and especially to Adam for a very interesting, a fascinating section or session on this great initiative in England, Project B1. And just to remind everyone that we are organising these training sessions from the IBSA Football Committee, but we are doing so with support from UEFA. So these sessions are part of our UEFA-supported, UEFA-backed European development project, and we must acknowledge their support to make this kind of thing happen. The next session will be on Monday, August the 2nd at the same time. So Monday, August the 2nd. And we will send out a link, a reminder with a link to the session that morning or the day before. If you don't receive it a couple of hours before the session is due to start, then please contact me and I'll be happy to share the link with you. I'm afraid some of you didn't receive the reminder email we sent out this morning. We apologize for that, but if you don't receive the link on the morning of August the 2nd, then please let me know and I'll be happy to share it with you. Okay, thanks very much.
Just David, just before you cut everybody off, just to say that to everybody that John is trying to find a way that he can post all the videos on the IBSA website so you can see them at normal speed. So just bear with us and we'll try and get them on the IBSA website as soon as we're able to work out the most appropriate method. But yeah, we're really hoping that can be done quite shortly. But thanks everybody. Great talking to you again.
Thank you, Adam.
Everyone, bye-bye now.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Mariano. Oh.
Bye, everyone.
You guys, your boy now knows more than than Mariano about football.